Is there anything more fundamental than pain? Hello and welcome to Curse Mojo, and today, I, am pitting against two of webcomics' most beloved heroes, beloved being in quotations, against each other. That being Sonichu, created by Christine Weston Chandler, and The Lightbringer, created by Louis Lovehog, aka Linkara. Rather it be through their inspirations, or their powers, or their writing, which one is better than the other? Before we begin, are you Team Sonichu or Team Lightbringer? Let us know in the comments. So grab yourself a snack and a glass of orange juice and try not to punch your screen, cause here we go! Round 1. Inspirations. Sonichu is pretty obvious, being based on both Pikachu from Pokemon and Sonic the Hedgehog, two very popular children's franchises that merged together, with the comic book format most likely being inspired by the infamous Sonic comics. Lightbringer is a little more different, yet fundamentally similar. On appearance, he seemingly resembles a Green Lantern, but white instead of green. However, the backstory does come to mind Spider-Man, Batman, and if you look closely, Rorschach from Watchmen. However, while Lightbringer can be seen as cliched and generic, it's a lot more subtle than this Chinese bootleg looking thing. Not only that, but Sonic is cringe, and Pokemon can also be cringe, but superheroes are a little less cringe. So within that arbitrary system, the win goes to Lightbringer. Round 2. Powers. Sonichu being based on a Pokemon does contain a lot of the physiology that comes with the franchise, but due to being the main character, he does have a proper balance, not being too weak, but not being too strong. Kinda like Mario in a weird way. As such, he is solely a lightning type, compared to many of his peers who have a secondary typing. Lightbringer, however, does seem to possess many of the more cliched powers many superheroes like him would have. He doesn't appear to have super strength or speed that are of note, but he can't fly. He can also shoot heated laser-like beams that can give people burns, but it's very likely that he has to hold back due to his no-kill policy. Although there are times where his powers can seem very similar to Green Lantern, he doesn't transform his beam into objects as much as you'd think. In actuality, the Lightbringer is more closer to a male Starlight than a Green Lantern, which I'm sure is most likely a coincidence since I don't believe Lewis has read The Boys, let alone like it. Speed, of course, is a no-brainer, thus merging speed and lighting way before the live-action movies did. And it also appears that he seems to be more faster than his companions, I'm not really sure. With the exception of maybe Blake. I don't think Chris established that, let alone put some thought into it. Now, as far as durability is concerned, Lightbringer does not seem to have any of that, with Sonichu being able to hold his own for most of his fights. It's just that Chris Chan and Sonichu steals most of the spotlight. As for IQ, I'm gonna skip this, none of these characters are that smart. However, when all the Sonichu balls are collected, Sonichu becomes Ultra Sonichu, and might have the power to cure autism or whatever the hell happened here. Lightbringer does not have a super form. One of his strongest moves, however, involved using light from the entire city, kinda similar to what Starlight did in the ending of Season 3, but in a grander scale. Now after all that is said and done, I do believe the point goes to Sonichu. Round 3. Which story has the best writing, Sonichu or Lightbringer? Both of these webcomics are all pieces of fanfiction that both of these creators want to see in their favorite medium. And while that in and of itself isn't inherently bad, scenes can get very sloppy very quick. Sonichu, very early within the run, started to be a bit of a blog, filled with Chris Chan's revenge fantasies. Of art of what appears to be by a 5-year-old, when the person in question is actually in their late 20s or early 30s, which is actually quite morbid all things considered. Now, the Lightbringer, on the other hand, is a little different, as it tries to use a lot of very edgy tropes and very serious subject matter to show how down the earth the comic is. And unlike Sonichu, looking like it was drawn by a 5-year-old with a learning disability, Lightbringer looks like it was made by a middle schooler with a learning disability. Quite an improvement if I say so myself. Which is why, later on, Lewis decided to hire other artists to draw for him instead, having a lot more self-awareness. Now, as far as their backstories are concerned, Sonichu was once a simple Pikachu that witnessed the events of Sonic Adventure 1, who bumped into Sonic and mutated him into a Sonichu. However, like many comic book characters, this backstory was somewhat retconned to some extent, as some stories would portray him to be a baby Sonny with a prior friendship to the other characters. And one where he and Rosechu, while portrayed to be 16 at the start of the comic, are just 18 just because. And we're not even going to dab on whether the idea guys changed the story. Now, Lightbringer's backstory is still somewhat of a mystery. Born as Carter Granholm, he is an owner of a small business, a fantasy version based on Lewis's real life at the time. It is never explored to why he had these powers, just that he took a vow of pacifism from his parent, which was most likely a commentary of moral guardians, as the parents forbade the character from reading comics in general. Yeah, his parents kinda suck. But wait, what about seams? While it's possible to find a theme of not wanting to grow up, or something similar to that in the works of Sonichu, a lot of that is very unintentional of the author, as the comic is purely just to make their own media franchise. On the other hand, Lightbringer tries to be a grounded superhero, despite the art being just as cartoony. It does have some things to say about morality, but it gets fairly generic. Also, it gets certain source materials wrong. However, unlike Sonichu, some good ideas are present, with many of the rough edges ready to be smoothed out. But, while characters like these are meant to be heroic, sometimes when the quality is questionable, scenes can get fairly blurry considering their action. In Sonichu, there was plenty of shady scenes going on in Quickville, such as homosexuality being banned for a period of time. And other than that, some of the villains in the comic got very disturbing deaths, made even worse as they're based on real people. Lightbringer has similar, but less gruesome fates. While many of them are handled fairly appropriately, there was one time Lightbringer tried to bypass a no-kill policy by blinding his enemies with his powers. But while that might be seen as brutal, I do think there's a lot of room for the story to criticize the main character's action, where Sonichu's story goes absolutely unpunished, though the Lightbringer ended before anything happened. But I do think there was some potential there, which is why the point goes to Lightbringer. Round 4. The supporting characters. So what are supporting casts like in most of these comics? Sonichu's main love interest is Rosechu, who isn't technically a recolor, but Amy Rose with a long Raichu tail. And if there's one thing that's very consistent within the Sonichu lore, is that Sonichu is never seen without his love interest. Although the actual character of Chris Chan is another story entirely, which we'll get to in a moment. Lightbringer, on the other hand, doesn't really have a lot of interest in developing relationships. In fact, the closest it ever got was near the end of the comic's run was the Crimson Baroness, which quickly played into the Batman Catwoman trope. Sonichu has a very major supporting cast full of colorful recolored characters, some of which that were stolen. However, many of them have been corrupted by the idea guy's influence. But none of them are as corrupted as the author themselves, Chris Chan, where their real life linked more and more into the comic, who was meant to be a supporting character, but ended up developing into a bit of the main protagonist. In comparison, Lightbringer has a fairly smaller supporting cast. The most notable of these characters would be Hannah, first seen as a victim, ended up being one of Lightbringer's most trusted allies, and eventual sidekick, as Osprey. And it's to the point where she has the potential to be a lot more competent than the Lightbringer himself. However, to some, this could make her look like a Mary Sue, though in my opinion it just reveals how lame the Lightbringer actually is. There is another side character named Linkara, however they were simply a character from another story, with a different tone and different circumstances. Now last but not least, what is a hero without their villains? Sonichu has multiple ones on page and in real life. Starting at the beginning of the comic, Sonichu fought the likes of Giovanni and Dr. Robotnik. The main villains would instead be Marilee Walsh and the Jerkops, who are based on authority figures in Chris Chan's life, with many others joining the very colorful, yet overly documented Rose Gallery, with many of these characters having a lot of history regarding the author of Chris Chan, which could make this comic hard to follow. Now the Lightbringer, less so. The most memorable villain here came in form of Serpent, who is a man who openly traffics young women with collars and chains on his side. While the attempt was a commentary on a serious issue, the whole thing fell flat on his face, to the point where the rest of the comic is kind of ignored. There are other characters like General Kirez, Darkbringer, the Smiling Man, and many others, but no one really cares. With many of Chris Chan's side characters raising eyebrows and questions, Lightbringer left very little impression. Therefore, the point goes to Sonichu. And the final round. Who would actually win in a fight? Sonichu or Lightbringer? Now, throughout the comic, Sonichu has been through a dozen of battles. We aren't counting the sub-chapters. There's too much. But in only 3 of them, Sonichu has actually lost. One where Crystal was trapped in the mirror for an entire arc, being defeated by the creator of the Encyclopedia Dramatica page, and whatever the hell happened here. There's also the scene of Sonichu bumping into Sonic because of Blake, but I don't think that counts. Lightbringer has been in just as much fights, but has had a lot more losses. While fighting down petty crooks is no problem, many of the fights of his rogues gallery has him constantly losing. Sure, he would later get the upper hand, but most of the time he's forced to be rescued by Hannah. Even on his most recurring foe, the Darkbringer, he still loses a lot. And technically, he never really did beat the Smiling Man from the earlier chapters. There's even a time where Lightbringer fought off a criminal, but gets stabbed by a heroin needle during it. So he won the fight, but that still feels like a loss. And with all the power said and done, I think that it's fair to say that if it were to be Sonichu versus Lightbringer, Sonichu would clearly be victorious. So point goes to Sonichu. So tallying up all the results, Sonichu wins. However, even though the Lightbringer lost, you could say the Lightbringer won by simply losing. Do you think the test is broken? Comment down below. And I'll ignore it just like my shame. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want, you see my other content. Hope to see you soon.